Before we start the talk, a request from a resident of the dormitory floor. Is it possible to remind people about opening and closing doors quietly on the dorm floor during and between work period and rest period? To open and close the doors quietly during and before and after the work period and during the rest period. Some people sleep during these times, and today it was quite noisy. Bearing in mind that not everybody has a job at the same time. People have jobs at different times and may use the work period to rest. So can we keep that in mind? It's a marvelous thing to take the time to simply open and close a door without making anything out of it. Today is day 4 of the March 89 7-day retreat at Springwater. Right at the beginning, I'd like to pose a question which was brought up yesterday by someone who asked, is what we're doing here in this place conditioning people's minds and bodies? Is what we're doing here in this place, this sitting hall and whatever goes with the place, conditioning people's minds and bodies? And a similar question is Toni's way of questioning something that becomes just mere imitation for someone else? It's important to bring these questions up because we do so much unawares, and now some more. Maybe learning a certain behavior here, a certain way of questioning. Unawares, imitating it. We've touched upon it already by asking, in doing something, is one interpreting Toni's words to mean you ought to do this, you have to be attentive. You must do this, you mustn't do that. We are always acting in a conditioned, habitual way when we're not attentive. When there's no attention, we are on automatic. That is a fact which every one of us can verify for oneself. When there's no attention, we act out of automatic habits, which are either ancient old habits or freshly picked up. It happens anywhere, and it happens in this place. It's unavoidable, particularly if one comes to this place with a lot of wants and a lot of fear, because fear and wanting are prime conditioners. If I want something, the brain will try to pick up things to do, hoping with that it will get what it wants. Sort of scanning what is the thing that people do here, and maybe if I do that, I will get a result. A desired result. And if there's fear, I'm not going to look at this, I'm not going to touch this. And the mind becomes conditioned to hiding from itself, escaping. So, a question that is asked here is not given to be imitated. But it doesn't hurt to ask the same question if there's attention in listening as the question is being put. Attention in looking and wondering. Then that question does not become a conditioner, it becomes an opener to look and listen. But if one just takes over a question hoping that by asking this or repeating it one will achieve a result, then the question is a conditioner. Can one see that for oneself? I'm not saying people are doing that, but the question has been brought up to me. What is also often mentioned outside of retreat is people who are around you, maybe on staff or come here often, sound like you. They use the same words as you, and I'm suspicious whether these words are just imitation or whether they really come out of a depth of understanding. How will one be able to tell for oneself rather than rely on suspicion? Don't we all need to be able to find out for ourselves where someone is coming from, to be able to see that? Or if one can't see it, one has to be suspicious, not take over what someone says, just as one is not to take over what Toni says. But wonder whether one can see for oneself the truth or falsehood of it. If we can't see for ourselves the truth or falsehood of what someone says, we will forever be roped in, deceived, or led to believe something, led to follow somebody who sounds so convincing. Sometimes people say, this teacher sounds so strong, is so radiant. Strength and radiance is no proof of that what is said is really so. When we're wanting and fearing, we're so gullible. So in need of having something to latch onto or somebody to latch onto. But the beauty of this work is that no one can see for me. No one can see for another. One can point out things and talk about what one sees to be so, but, and this may get someone else to look. May not, and it may. At this moment or at another time. But the seeing is not being transmitted. It is not conveyable. It can't be given to someone else. No teacher and no system of belief or teaching, religious dogma, so can see for another, can do that for someone else. So in meeting someone who sounds like someone else, uses the words, and there's no ownership of these words which are being used. They don't belong to me or to anyone else. They are just vehicles to express something which really ultimately cannot be expressed. In meeting someone who uses these words, Not to assume just because the same words are used that therefore this person is imitating and doesn't understand. Why doesn't one find out and ask, start a discussion, start a dialogue with each other? What do you mean by that? I'm interested to hear, to look with you. And not just turn away with prejudice because the person uses these words, therefore assuming it's imitation. And maybe it may not be. Can we communicate with each other, not on the basis of idea and conclusion, assumption, but finding out indirectly talking with each other, simply. Sometimes people say to me that I don't know what you mean by that word. All right, let's use another one, not attached to these words. It's good if somebody says that, but very often if someone has an image of me as being some teacher of the past that one has had, one may not dare ask this question. But these questions are really welcome. Keeps this whole work alive. Because all of us benefit from looking again and again, anew and fresh, what we really mean by the words that we're using. Because the brain is such an amazing automat. That words come from memory faster than lightning. And one may not have used the words to express what one really wants to say. And then it's helpful for someone else to say, well, what do you mean by this word? So one has to stop and look. Turn inward, pause for a moment and really look carefully. And that makes for a good dialogue and a good being together. Not fighting each other or creating images about each other, but exploring together, investigating together. Whether the mats with little brown cushions around the edge of the room and left and right of the two dividers have a conditioning effect, can one be open to that? The bell, we're reducing bells all the time. I find it wonderful not to have that wooden thing there sounding anymore. It had such I don't have to have a word for it. We've all heard it. It's people just coming in here. 10 minutes ago, one woke up maybe, and now one walks in here. Can the bell just be a bare time signal and nothing else? It doesn't mean you have to be in here now. You have to start something. What starts when that wooden gong sound, this wooden block sound? Does anything start then? The only thing that starts is that in hearing the bell 10 minutes ago is to, if one wants to sit in here, get ready. Put the clothes on or wash up or whatever. To be in here for a period of quiet sitting. But it doesn't mean one has to be in here for a period of quiet sitting. And that's very difficult to realize, particularly if one has been trained, as many of us have been, with a rigid discipline of having to be there for every sitting and so forth. And if one is not, then there is a reprimand. So can this come to the surface if this is still operating? can one realize that one doesn't need to feel guilty about not coming to a sitting? Or how guilty one does feel, and people tell me this. I still feel guilty when I go for a walk and see other people going into the sitting room. From way back. All right, let's air it. Let's let this come to the surface. Fresh spring air to waft over it, over all these old ideas. And maybe they will dissipate. Or at least if they don't dissipate, one realizes they don't apply. They're just what we call deep conditioning. What is right and what is wrong, and feeling accordingly. Feeling good and commendable if one goes to every sitting, feeling, I don't know how one feels when one doesn't go to a sitting. To be in touch with it. And not be under the influence and pressure of those feelings, but see them for being conditioned. Which means prior conditions have imprinted in the mind. A response which comes up every time this is seen, heard, or felt, or whatever is associated with a previous imprint. All of us who work on staff are quite leery, and we meet a lot about all the guidelines that are being given at the beginning of a retreat. They're like a harmonica, they wax and wane. We come to a point where we feel, well, let's just not say anything of the minimum, the fire regulations, and maybe something about going to meetings. And then lots of notes are written by people who don't know how to do this, or there are notes about doors too noisy, or this or that. So the guidelines wax again. I think we've reached an optimum again last time. So they're probably going to be on the wane. It really comes out of what people want here in terms of quietness and being left aloneness. And that takes some talking at the beginning. But with it goes the fear, I have to follow all this, and what if I transgress? Which comes from our past conditioning. And that's the difficulty to see that it is not an imposed regimentation for the sake of regimentation and discipline, but for the sake of working together as most of us want to work, in quietness for 7 days, with a minimum of writing notes and explaining and asking questions and crossing someone else. So we're always open to suggestions of what could be changed or done differently. We discuss it at length in our staff meetings. There's no rigid thing that we're adhering to here. At least I'm not aware of it, but please let me know if you see something, and we'll look at it. Yesterday, just before the talk ended, we touched upon this question of pain, but never got to it. And since it comes up so much, let us devote some time to it. As one person puts it, why does pain attract so much attention to it? So much energy and attention to it. Is that inevitable? And how do I meet pain? I don't really know how. I've never learned, except by resistance or escape, or feeling a victim of it. Having just during the last 3-day retreat the day before a knee injury from skiing, I was able to see. It was amazing, just as this person said, how much attention and energy is attracted to an acute injury, pain. What was also amazing was there was the first retreat I can remember in which sleeping was no problem. Sleeping during breaks, sleeping at night, not waking up earlier than what the wake-up person came to wake me up. And the feeling was that the injury demanded a lot of rest. And I could tell from day to day how much progress there was in walking. From complete hobbling on crutches to walking without that, from all of this rest probably, and the energy that it attracted. That seems to be a real fact of this body, the wisdom of this body, the intelligence of it. And I've meanwhile read that sleep is the best time for the body to heal. Obviously, don't do another stupid thing with your leg. You just lie there. Although, maybe one can also twist it while turning around in bed. I don't know. Is that the sole attention and energy that is attracted to pain? The sort of healing attention or healing energy? Because energy is attracted to protect it, to not injure it any further. But is there more? Is there more than that? Or is there more protection than is necessary? More fear for it? More fussing over it than is necessary? One can ask those questions and allow the behavior to reveal what is going on. If one has had an ache here and sitting, an aching back, pain in the knee, not from an injury, but from whatever brings it about, how does one meet that? How does one live and sit and deal with it, as we say? That's always our question. How am I going to deal with it? What am I going to do about it? Again, I remember one of the first sessions I went to, having always had a bad back in my teens for whatever reason. I was already afraid whether I was able to do this sitting with knowing what kind of a back I had. And then the pain came, and it was absolutely excruciating. Now, I couldn't remember ever having had it quite that bad. I was worried about it, and really wondering whether I could finish the retreat, the session. And what was realized was that all my knowledge about this pain, how it was and how long it has been and what its course was when it set in, all of this knowledge was part of this pain. And it occurred quite by itself. It occurred to me quite by itself, not through thinking about it. It just occurred that I didn't really know this thing. What I knew was memory about it. But what this actually was, I didn't know. So I couldn't call it by any name anymore. because the name that was clear immediately brought with it all the knowledge and the attitudes, the fear of it, the wanting to deal with it or do something about it, wanted to go away or forget about it, overcome it, all of the stuff that has accumulated in brain and body about pain, including becoming the victim of it, sacrificial lamb. And what that does to the body brings some sort of distorted satisfaction. All of that dropped away in realizing I didn't know what this was right now, this instant. And with that, as many people know who have had pain in setting, with that it changed. It was not the same anymore. It was something, it was no obstacle. On the contrary, there seemed to be an energy, not from the pain, but from the state of not knowing. Freeing the energy that goes with knowing and worrying and becoming something through the pain. That all ties up and blocks energy, which is released when one doesn't know, when there's not knowing. Does not mean the discomfort is necessarily gone, but it's not a discomfort, it's what it is, something that's there. And not incapacitating. Several people have reported that in carefully observing, with intervals, of course, intervals of inattention, carefully observing what the thoughts and feelings and emotions are all about, from moment to moment, day in and day out, and also night in, night out, because we dream. That's all concerned with oneself. Some people said it was utterly amazing to me that every thought and the feelings and emotions connected with it is self-centered. I never realized that. And the next question, what am I going to do about it? As this thought comes up to me, the person said, I feel a defense arising around this me. Very often, this defense signaling, don't look any further. Leave me alone. The other reaction is great despair or sadness or frustration over this discovery. We haven't in this retreat talked too much about self yet, but in the light of our first question, is one really seeing thought concerned with self, or does one just assume one is self-centered? I've got a big fat ego. It's easy to say that. But does one really observe it and see it as it functions in such subtle ways? That's direct discovery. And can there just be that direct discovery? Or does it have to be an instantaneous reaction against what one is discovering? That's how we operate, which is another interesting discovery. Nothing can be left alone for what it is, constantly self-centered concern and the defense of it. But it shouldn't be like that. I wish it was otherwise, or depression over it, despair, which is more thought about oneself, how poor one is, inadequate, in comparison to what one had thought one was, and what one had hoped other people would think one is, namely not so self-centered, altruistic, or compassionate. So can one, instead of giving way to incredible reaction to this, to saying it is bad and I shouldn't be this way, spot this instantly and see the uselessness of such commentary, and look at why it is that one is in despair, whether it has to do with this ideal image that we create about ourselves with the help of others. We've been told, little children are told by their parents, don't be so selfish. The little child doesn't even know what selfishness is. I already told you, so selfish. Share your toy with someone else, then that's unselfish. So we've got our images from what we've been told we are, and what we've been told we should be. Unselfish, altruistic, this or that. And now, in quietly observing the topic of each thought or feeling, what it is all about, one discovers it's about me, what I want, what I'm afraid of, what I wish I had, what I wish I could be, become, and so forth. And then the comparison with the image and the despair, the frustration, which is the frustration of our life, not getting what we want, not being what we should be. Always comparing what is glimpsed for a moment as taking place with what is known should be taking place. What has been learned and indoctrinated we should be like. And this idea of what we should be like, isn't that the prime inhibitor of seeing what we actually are like without judgment? So can one discover in this whole process the danger of the self-image, the blinding of it, how it prevents clear seeing. It interposes itself and says, this is how I should be. And then I don't want to look any further, because there's attachment to the idea of what I should be like, and I may have believed this is what I am like, because we have not been brought up to test and to see what we're like. We've been brought up to ignore it and go with the ideal, strive to become the ideal. We've been told what is bad. To be angry is bad, to have rage is bad, to be sad is bad. parents and teachers want the children to smile at a time that a child is sad or full of anger, and an adult saying, smile. Why don't you smile? I've seen parents tickling their children when they were angry to help them out of that. The confusion for the child and on the part of the parent. Wiring going haywire, feeling angry and now being tickled and having to laugh, being told you should be this way, not that way. So here we're discovering this. Seeing self-centeredness in every thought. Maybe not every thought is self-centered, but the conclusion by observing thoughts off and on is, well, I'm totally self-centered. We have this way of concluding too. But leaving that alone for the moment. One has observed something to be so. Why does that need to be defended? Why does the self need to be defended? The self-image. That perpetuates this blindness. Do you see that? That perpetuates the energy blocked up in illusion, in fantasy, and not available for contact with reality, with the truth of this moment, of a self-centered thought. That's the truth of this moment as it happens. That's what's happening. It's so. Actually, if there is a direct discovery of a thought or a feeling, and not an instantaneous reaction against it, just the discovery of what happened a moment ago, and that there can be great energy and joy, even if what is discovered is utter self-centeredness of an instant ago, because at the moment of insight, there is no thought, or else there wouldn't be any insight. At the moment of seeing, there's just seeing. And seeing what thoughts went through the mind a moment ago, that's being here. With what is. And if it's really seeing and not immediately thinking it shouldn't be like this, but the purity of attention, of awareness, then there are also the birds and the wind and the movements of people in the room and the breathing, the heart, the feeling of the body, maybe in pain. That's being here, seeing what's going on without judgment of what should be going on. That immediately removes contact with reality and continues contact with the fantasy of our life, the fantasy story of our life, in which we live most of the time trying to embellish it or ashamed of it or whatever. So is the difficulty, which many people have reported, the difficulty of really looking so far and then wanting to look no further for fear of what may reveal itself. And therefore suspicious of this whole business of attention. Does that have to do with preserving the images of oneself? And can one see directly the blindness of an image, how it prevents touch with what's real and true? If this is discovered freshly over and over again, then the power of the image gives way. It peters out. may come up again automatically because it has come up for one's whole lifetime and the lifetime of one's parents and ancestors. The tremendous momentum of time behind this self-image. Not just the time of our life, but everything around us is consumed with self-image, individually and as aggregates. And the power of my image and everybody else's image and the national image dominates us. Not to look what we're really like. It was so dramatically and clearly demonstrated during the recent presidential elections. How much we abhor hearing what is really wrong with what we're doing in this country, with what's going on in the streets and in foreign affairs, foreign countries, our doings. If somebody points that out, people don't want to hear it. They want to hear somebody say, all is fine and we are standing proud in this shining city. Shining city meaning America, a shining city. And that's what we want to hear, and that's who we vote for. Helping to maintain the image that calms us down, that doesn't spell the trouble of looking what may be wrong and in need of work, in need of attention. This may be why it is hard at times for some people to listen to a talk like this, because it does not talk about the shiny city of the future that we will all get to and inhabit, but it points out the mess, the garbage, the problems that we create for ourselves, and the sorrow in which we live with it. But I've never felt it depressing to look at it or talk about it. Because in seeing the truth of anything, there is liberation from the image. Do you see that? You don't have to adhere to an image or believe in it if you see what's actually going on. And then you can also see the birds and the trees and the green. And you can hear the sound of this gushing water. When I arrived here in March, it was hardly moving under the ice, and now it's a powerful stream. The sound of it. Right on the top of the hill, it roars like Niagara. Was that an image? It was just a word. The roar is what it is. One has to be there, stand there, and feel the squishing underfoot of the mud and water welling up, and this cascade, and then the quietness once it's fallen. There's a quiet movement, and then a whirl again. And these old trees which have fallen over. Old trees and new trees fallen over. Some still have their leaves on. Did you see that? Yellow leaves on one tree and moss on the old one. That's no belief, that's no image. It's there for everyone to see. Looking and listening is not complicated. It's very simple. Thought makes it complicated. Thought about me. And can I, or should I, or shouldn't I? But that too can be seen and heard and blow away. Someone yesterday asked, what is compassion? I won't talk about it right now. Maybe it'll come up some other time. But someone wondered, what is compassion? Can the question just sit there, not answering from what we know about it? We will end here for today.